like to, have this sort of long-term vision for something called X.com from way back in the day, which is kind of like a sort of like an everything app.
He lost tens of billions of dollars doing it. And when he took over and looked behind the curtain, he discovered Twitter was really a tool of the global intel agencies to spy on people and emit propaganda.
Various government agencies had effectively had full access to everything that was going on Twitter. Blew my mind.
Before Elon Musk bought it, Twitter wasn't so much a social media site as a honey trap operated by global intelligence agencies, including our own. One of the very first things Elon Musk did was fire all the spies who worked at Twitter. Then he fired a lot of other people too, including the entire PR department, the HR department, and a lot of other useless baggage who weren't helping the company do anything worth doing. And what happened next?
Why you bought Twitter? Why didn't you create your own platform? Maybe it was cheaper for you?
I mean, I thought about creating something from scratch, but I thought Twitter would perhaps accelerate progress versus creating something from scratch by 3 to 5 years. I think we are seeing just a tremendous technology acceleration that 3 to 5 years is actually worth a lot. I mean, to be frank, I was a little worried about the direction that and the effect of social media on the world, and especially Twitter. And I thought it was very important for there to be a maximally trusted sort of digital public square where people, within countries and internationally could communicate with, the least amount of censorship allowed by law. Obviously, that varies a lot by jurisdiction, but I think in general, social media companies should adhere to the laws of countries and not try to put a thumb on the scale beyond the laws of countries. So, I think this is something that is probably agreeable to the legislators and the people of most countries. So I think that's the general idea. It's just to reflect the values of the people, as opposed to imposing the values of essentially San Francisco and Berkeley, which are somewhat of a niche ideology as compared to the rest of the world. But Twitter was, I think, doing a little too much to impose a niche San Francisco Berkeley ideology on the world. I thought it was important kind of for the future of civilization to try to correct that thumb on the scale, if you will, and just have Twitter more accurately reflect, like I said, the values of the people of Earth. That's the intention, and hopefully we succeed in doing that.
But how do you see Twitter? If we say 5 years down the road, what's your vision for this platform? What should it do?
Well, I think I'd like to have this sort of long-term vision for something called X.com from way back in the day, which is kind of like a sort of like an everything app, where it's just maximally useful. It does payments, so it provides financial services, provides information flow, really anything digital, and also provides secure communications. So really I think be as useful as possible, as entertaining as possible, and also to be like a source of truth. Like if you want to find out what's going on and what's really going on, then you should be able to go on X, the X app, and find out. So it's a source of truth and a maximally useful, I guess app is about the wrong word, but system. And Twitter is essentially an accelerant to that sort of maximally useful everything app. Yeah.
How you are gonna? I mean, if you look at Twitter today, I mean, it's a platform. Sometimes there is a lot of misinformation in Twitter. Sometimes I don't feel comfortable even because there is some way there is this negative between nation, between people, between a different ethnic group. There is this hate thing. How you are gonna fix this issue where you are on a mission for humanity to get them together?
Yeah, I think there's something that we're putting a lot of effort into called community notes. It's currently just in English, but we will be expanding it to all languages. And that is, I think, quite a good way to assess the truth of things, where it's the community itself, basically the people of Earth who are basically, not exactly voting, but competing to provide the most accurate information. So it's sort of a competition for truth, and I think it's a very powerful concept to have a competition for truth. And because you can also say, like, what is true? It's because what may be true to some may not be viewed as true to others, but you want to have the closest approximation of that. So I think the community notes thing is very powerful. I think the trying to have as many organizations and people and institutions verified as being legitimately those people and organizations is important. And to have the organizational affiliation clearly identified, so that if you want to find out if somebody's actually, if an account is actually, say, from a member of parliament or a journalist, or if let's say if a Twitter handle is actually belongs to, say, Disney Corporation or something like that, you can go on Twitter and it's sort of an identity layer of the internet, and you can confirm that is in fact the case. And I think once you've got these sort of interlocking sort of identities, it's actually very hard to be deceptive in that case, because and it's also, you have a reputation to protect at that point. So I think then people are far more likely to be measured in their response, and be more reasonable, since they have reputational value at that point. So these are some of the ideas that I have, and I'm not saying that for sure it will succeed or it's going to be perfect, but I am confident that it will, over time, head into a good direction. And I think the evidence for that will be, do people find it useful? As we're measuring sort of the total user minutes, but not just user minutes, unregretted user minutes is, I think, the key figure of merit. Because while, for example, TikTok has a very high usage, I often hear people say, well, I spent 2 hours on TikTok, but I regret those 2 hours. I'm not trying to knock TikTok, but it's just, we don't want that to be the case with Twitter. We want to say, like, okay, you spent half an hour on Twitter, but you found it to be useful and entertaining and a good thing in your life. And ultimately be a force for good for civilization. That's the aspiration.
Thank you. Elon, we have over 150 government within the World Government Summit, global leaders. They have 8 billion customers, their citizens. How government can use Twitter better to serve its citizens?
Yeah, well, I think generally I would recommend really communicating a lot on Twitter. I think it's good for people to speak in their voice as opposed to how they think they should speak. Sometimes people think, well, I should speak in this way that is expected of me, but it ends up sounding, I think, at times somewhat stiff, and not real. If you read a press release from a corporation, it just sounds like propaganda. I would encourage CEOs and companies and legislators and ministers and so forth to speak authentically, and to if there's a particular policy, to explain it, and I think there's sometimes a concern about criticism, but I think at the end of the day, having some criticism is fine. It's really not that bad. I'm constantly attacked on Twitter, frankly, and I don't mind. You have to be somewhat thick-skinned, I suppose, at times. Just because they really will try to twist the knife. But I think just like I said, just as a forum for communication, it's great, and I would just encourage more communication, and like I said, to sort of speak in an authentic voice. Like sometimes people will have someone else be their sort of Twitter manager or something like that, and I think people should do their own tweets. It sounds and like sometimes you make a mistake or something, it's fine. But I think just doing your own tweets, just like you would do your own, you'd give a talk here, or you would have a meeting at a summit or something. I think that's the way to do it, is to actually do the tweets yourself, and convey the message that you want directly. Yeah. So, but I mean, one thing I should say and I know this is called the World Government Summit, but I think we should be maybe a little bit concerned about actually becoming too much of a single world government. If I may say that we want to avoid creating a civilizational risk by having, frankly, this may sound a little odd, too much cooperation between governments. If you look at, say, at history and the rise and fall of civilizations, really all throughout history, civilizations have risen and fallen, but it hasn't meant the doom of humanity as a whole, because there've been all these separate civilizations that were separated by great distances. And so, say like while Rome was falling, Islam was rising, and so you had like the sort of caliphate doing incredibly well while Rome was doing terribly. And that actually ended up being a source of preservation of knowledge and many scientific advancements. And so I think we want to be a little bit cautious about being too much of a single civilization, because if we are too much of a single civilization, then if the whole thing may collapse. Now, I'm obviously not suggesting war or anything like that, but I think we want to be a little bit wary of actually cooperating too much. It sounds a little odd, but we want to have some amount of civilizational diversity, such that if something does go wrong with some part of civilization, that the whole thing doesn't collapse, and humanity keeps moving forward.
My last question, I'll go to Twitter again, then we'll move out of Twitter if you allowed us. You've been running Twitter as the chairman, as the owner, as the CEO, and that's take a lot of time. Did you identify a CEO, and when you are going to hire him?
Well, I think I need to stabilize the organization and just make sure it's in a financially healthy place, and that the product roadmap is clearly laid out. So I don't know. I'm guessing probably towards the end of this year would be good timing to find someone else to run the company, because I think it should be in a stable position around at the end of this year.
Elon, if we move to other subject, at the summit here, we have speakers who speak about state of the world, state of geopolitical of the world for the next 10 decades, state of the economy of the world, now and the next 10 years. If I ask you about the state of technology, if you can elaborate a bit and brief us, how do you see technology in the next 10 years from now?
So 10 years, it's always difficult to predict technology with precision, especially over a 10-year time frame when it is changing so much. There's obviously the transition to sustainable energy with solar, wind, batteries, electric vehicles, and that is, if you look at the percentage growth of that is a very high percentage growth. Although because of the massive industrial base of the current sort of fossil fuel economy, even if all, for example, if electric cars were 100% of production immediately, it would take 20 years to replace the fleet. So this is still something that is quite gradual. It's measured in at least a few, 30, 40 years type of time frame. On a more sort of near-term time frame, I think artificial intelligence is something we need to be quite concerned about and really be attentive to the safety of AI. You mentioned ChatGPT earlier. I played a significant role in the creation of OpenAI. Essentially, at the time, I was concerned that Google was not paying enough attention to AI safety. And so I, with a number of other people, created OpenAI. And although initially it was created as an open source nonprofit, and now it is closed source and for profit. I don't have any stake in OpenAI anymore, nor am I on the board, nor do I control it in any way. But the ChatGPT, I think, has illustrated to people just how advanced AI has become. Because the AI has been advanced for a while, it just didn't have a user interface that was accessible to most people. So what really ChatGPT has done is just put an accessible user interface on AI technology that has been present for a few years, and there are much more advanced versions of that are coming out. So I think we need to really be. I think we need to regulate AI safety frankly, because if you think of any technology which is potentially a risk to to people, like if it's an aircraft or cars or medicine, we have regulatory bodies that oversee the public safety of cars and planes and medicine. And I think we should have a similar sort of regulatory oversight for artificial intelligence, because it is, I think, actually a bigger risk to society than cars or planes or medicine. So, and this may slow down AI a little bit, but I think that might also be a good thing. The challenge here is that government regulatory authorities tend to be set up in reaction to something bad that happened. If you look at, say, aircraft or cars, the cars were unregulated at the beginning. Aircraft were unregulated, but they had lots of airplane crashes, and in some cases manufacturers that were cutting corners, and a lot of people were dying. So the public was not happy about that, and so they established a regulatory authority to improve safety. And now commercial airliners are extremely safe. In fact, they're safer than if you were to drive somewhere. The safety per mile of a commercial airliner is better than a car, and cars are also extremely safe compared to where they used to be. But if you look at, say, the introduction of seatbelts, the auto industry fought the introduction of seatbelts as a safety measure for 10 or 15 years before finally the regulators made them put seatbelts in cars, and that greatly improved the safety of cars. And then airbags were another big improvement in safety. My concern is that with AI, if there's something bad, if something goes wrong, the reaction might be too slow from a regulatory standpoint. So I'd say, if I'd say, what are the biggest risks to the future of civilization? It's AI, but AI is a double. It's both positive and negative. It has great promise, great capability, but it also, with that comes great danger. I mean, you look at, say, nuclear, just discovery of sort of nuclear physics. You had nuclear power generation, but also nuclear bombs. So anyway, I think we should be quite concerned about it, and we should have some regulation of what is fundamentally a risk to the public.
Very great. Let me move to another subject, Elon. Education. I mean, you have your own philosophy about education. With AI, education might change dramatically. Can you tell us briefly about your philosophy of education? And number two, do we need 12 years of schooling and 4 years of university?
With respect to education, I think in general, some things that we could do to make it more compelling would be to explain to children why we are teaching a particular subject. So the human mind has evolved to really forget anything that it deems unimportant. So in fact, human memory is really quite bad relative to, say, the memory of your phone. Your phone can remember the entire contents of an encyclopedia down to the last letter and pixel. But human memory is terrible by comparison. So the mind is constantly trying to forget things, actually. So if you explain the why a subject is being taught, that will then establish relevance, and it's much more likely to result in motivation for kids. And then also, if you teach knowledge, especially in the sciences, as solutions to a problem, it's much more effective. So, like, let's say you're trying to understand an internal combustion engine. Well, it's actually better to sort of take that apart and then say, okay, well, what tools do we need to use to take it apart? We need a wrench and screwdriver and various other things to take it apart. Well, then you understand that the reason for the tools. And so, like, for mathematics and are like tools in physics and engineering. But if you teach to the problem and then you understand, then you establish the relevance of the tools, then it's actually much easier to remember mathematics and physics because they help explain how the world works, as opposed to teaching them without explaining why and simply teaching them. It's like, instead of teaching to the problem, currently people teach the tool. It would be like having a course on screwdrivers or a course on wrenches, but not understanding why you have a course you're learning about screwdrivers and wrenches. I think this is really quite a fundamental principle that should be applied in education. And I think sometimes we do teach classes that children do not find useful, and where the answer to the why is actually not going to be a very good answer. Most people, I think, do not find advanced mathematics useful and are unlikely to find it useful in their life. Or the elements that they do find useful could be taught very quickly as general principles. I also think that critical thinking is something that should be taught to children at a relatively young age, as effectively like a mental firewall, to really think about when somebody tells you something, is it cogent, is it true, or what is the probability that it is true, and so that you can be taught to reject things that are untrue or more likely to be untrue, and favor things that are more likely to be true. Critical thinking, I think, is very helpful for people to learn.
I mean, it remains to be seen as to whether this was financially smart. Currently, it is not. We just revalued the company at less than half of the acquisition price.
Did you really?
Yes. No, my timing was terrible for when the offer was made, because it was right before advertising plummeted, and
you cut the high water mark, I noticed.
Yeah. So I must be a real genius here. My timing is amazing, since I had bought it for at least twice as much as it should have been bought for. But some things are priceless, and so whether I lose money or not, that is a secondary issue compared to ensuring the strength of democracy, and free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy.
Yes.
And the speech needs to be as transparent and truthful as possible. So we've got a huge push on Twitter to be as truthful as possible. We've got this community notes feature, which is great.
It is great.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I saw it this morning.
Yeah.
It was far more honest than the New York Times.
It's great.
Yeah.
We put a lot of effort to ensuring that community notes does not get gamed or have biases. It is simply cares about what is the most accurate thing. And sometimes truth can be a little bit elusive, but you can still aspire to get closer to it.
Yes.
And so. And I think the effect of community notes is more powerful than people may realize, because once people know that they could get noted, community noted on Twitter, then they'll think more carefully about what they say. They are likely. It's an encouragement to be more truthful and less deceptive.
When you jumped into this, though, when you bought it, did you understand? Well, clearly you understood its importance. You wouldn't have bought it.
Twitter, yes.
Right. But it's not the biggest, but it's the most important in the social media companies. But did you understand the kind of ferocity you'd be facing, the attacks you'd be facing from power centers in the country?
I thought there'd probably be some negative reactions, yes. So I'm sure everyone would not be pleased with it. But at the end of the day, if the public is happy with it, that's what matters, and the public will speak with their actions. If they find Twitter to be useful, they will use it more, and if they find it to be not useful, they will use it less. If they find it to be the best source of truth, I think they will use it more. Now there's obviously a lot of organizations that are used to having sort of unfettered influence on Twitter that no longer have that.
Well, you stripped the New York Times of their badge this morning, and then you called them diarrhea. You called them. You did. I'm just quoting you. You described their Twitter feed as diarrhea.
I said it was the Twitter equivalent of diarrhea.
Okay, it's not literally diarrhea, but
no, it's it's a metaphor, but an accurate one. So, if you look at the at NY Times Twitter feed, it's unreadable. It's like because what they do is they tweet every single article, even the ones that are boring, even ones that don't make it into the paper. So it's just nonstop, zillion tweets a day with no. They really should just be saying, like, what are the top tweets?
Yes.
Like, what are the big stories of the day? I don't know. Put out like 10 or something. So some number that's manageable. As opposed to right now, if you would have followed NY Times on Twitter, you're going to get barraged with like hundreds of tweets a day.
Yeah.
And your whole feed will be filled with NY Times. So this is something I would recommend actually for all publications, which is for your primary feed, only put out your best stuff. I think I know a thing or two about how to use Twitter because I was the most interacted with account on the whole system before the acquisition. Before the acquisition closed. I didn't have the most number of followers, but I had the most number of interactions. And so I clearly know something about how to use Twitter. People's attention is limited, so just make sure you put the stuff that's most important there.
So because you and people like you do interact on Twitter, it's obviously enormously powerful in shaping public opinion. It's where a lot of ideas and trends are incubated.
Yeah.
That's why you
Absolutely.
bought it. It's also a magnet for intel agencies from around the world. And
yes.
One of the things we learned after you started opening the books is that they were exerting influence from within Twitter.
I mean, it was absurd.
Did you know that going in?
No. Since I've been a heavy Twitter user since 2009, it's sort of like I'm in the matrix. I mean, I can see do things feel right? Do they not feel right? What tweets am I being shown as recommended? I get a feel like what accounts are making comments. Where are the comments eerily similar?
Yeah.
And then you look at the account, and it's just obviously a fake photo, and it's just obviously a bot cluster over and over again. So I started to get just more and more uneasy about the Twitter situation. I was starting to feel like something's wrong in the state of Denmark here. Something feels wrong about the platform. It seemed to be just drifting in a. I couldn't place it exactly. Just it felt like it was drifting in a bad direction. So then I was like, and my conversations with the board and management seemed to confirm my intuition about that. But basically, I was convinced these guys do not care about fixing Twitter, and I had a bad feeling about where I was headed based on the conversations I had with them. So then I was like, you know what, I'll try acquiring it and see if acquiring it is possible. Now I didn't have enough cash to acquire it, so I would need support from others, from some of the existing investors. I would also need a lot of debt, and so it wasn't clear to me whether an acquisition would succeed, but I thought I would try. And ultimately, it did succeed. Anyway, here we are.
But when you got there, and all of a sudden you own it, and all the data on the servers belongs to you. And
Well, it belongs to the people, in my view, but yes.
But you can see what it is, and you can
Yes.
see what they've been doing, and you can see who's been working there. You were shocked to find out that various intel agencies were affecting its operations?
The degree to which various government agencies had effectively had full access to everything that was going on Twitter blew my mind. I was not aware of that.
Would that include people's DMs?
Yes. Yes, because the DMs are not encrypted. So one of the things that we're about to release is the ability to encrypt your DMs.
That's pretty heavy duty, though, because a lot of well-known people, reporters talking to their sources, government officials, the richest people in the world,
Sure.
they're DMing each other. And the assumption, obviously it was incorrect, but was that that's private, but that was being read by various governments.
Yeah, that seems to be, yes.
It's scary.
Yes, it is. Like I said, we're moving to have the DMs be optionally encrypted. I mean, there's a lot of DM conversations which are, just chatting with friends. It's
sure.
not important.
Of course.
It's hopefully coming out later this month, but no later than next month, is the ability to toggle encryption on or off. So if you are in a conversation you think is sensitive, you can just toggle encryption on, and then no one at Twitter can see what you're talking about. They could put a gun to my head and I couldn't tell it. I couldn't. That's sort of the gun to the head test. If somebody puts a gun to my head, and can I still not see your DMs? That's the acid test.
Yes.
And that's how it should be if you want your.
Have you had complaints from various governments about doing this?
I haven't had direct complaints to me. I've had sort of some indirect complaints. I think people are a little concerned about complaining to me directly in case I tweet about it. So they're sort of trying to be more roundabout than that. I mean, if I got something that was unconstitutional from the U.S. government, my reply would be to send them a copy of the First Amendment and just say what part of this are we getting wrong?
You have a lot of government. You have a lot of government
Curious.
contracts.
What part of this are we
though.
getting wrong? Please tell me.
I mean, it's a pretty. No, I'm just saying. But you're kind of exposed in your other businesses. So this is just in case our viewers aren't following this. This is not. You're not just like a journalist taking a stand on behalf of the First Amendment. You're a guy with big government contracts, giving the finger to the government. Do you think Twitter will be as central to this presidential campaign as it was in the last several?
I think it will play a significant role in elections, not just domestically, but internationally. The goal of New Twitter is to be as fair and even-handed as possible, so not favoring any political ideology, but just being fair at all.
Why doesn't Facebook do this? I know that Zuckerberg has said, and I take him at face value, that he, I do actually in this way, that he is a kind of old-fashioned liberal who doesn't like to censor. He has, but he, like, why wouldn't a company like that take the stand that you have taken, which is pretty rooted in American traditional political custom, for free speech?
My understanding is that Zuckerberg spent $400 million in the last election, nominally in a get-out-the-vote campaign, but really fundamentally in support of Democrats. Is that accurate or not accurate?
That is accurate. Yes.
Does that sound unbiased to you?
No, it doesn't.
Yes.
So you don't see hope that Facebook will approach this as a non-aligned arbiter? You've allowed Donald Trump back on Twitter. He hasn't taken you up on your offer because he's got his own thing.
Right.
Do you think he will go back on Twitter?
Well, that's obviously up to him. My job is to, I take the freedom of speech very seriously. So it's. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I actually voted for Biden. Not saying I'm a huge fan of Biden, because I think that would probably be inaccurate. But we have difficult choices to make in these presidential elections. It's not. I would prefer, frankly, that we put someone, just a normal person, as president, a normal person with common sense, and whose values are smack in the middle of the country. Center of the normal distribution, and I think that would be great. I think we have made maybe being president not that much fun, to be totally frank, for most of the traditional media companies, and made them more desperate to get clicks, get attention, and it's made them. When they're in sort of a desperate state, they will then tend to really push headlines that get the most clicks, whether those headlines are accurate or not. So it's resulted, in my view, I think most people would agree, a less truthful, less accurate news. Because they just got to get a rise out of people, and. I think it's also increased the negativity of the news, because I think we humans instinctually respond more to negative. I think we have an instinctual negative bias, which kind of makes sense in that, like, if let's say, it's more important to remember where was the lion, or where was the tribe that wants to kill my tribe, than where is the bush with berries.
Yes.
Like, one's like a permanent negative outcome, and the other is like, well, I might go hungry. So, meaning like there's an asymmetry in, sort of involved asymmetry in negative versus positive stuff. And also historically, the negative stuff would have been quite proximate, like it would have been near, represented a real danger to you as a person, if you heard negative news. Because historically, like a few hundred years ago, we're not hearing about what negative things are happening on the other side of the world, or on the other side of the country. We're hearing about negative things in our village, things that could actually have a bad effect on you. Whereas now we're hearing about. The news very often seems to attempt to answer the question, what is the worst thing that happened on Earth today? And you wonder why you're sad after reading that,
Do you read any legacy media outlets?
I mean, I really get most of my news from Twitter at this point. It is the #1 news source, I think, in the world at this point.
What percentage of your staff did you fire at Twitter? One of the great business stories of the year.
I think we're about 20% of the original size.
So 80% left.
Yes.
So
I mean, a lot of people voluntarily.
sure, but it's 80% are gone from the day you took
That's
over.
correct. Yes.
So how do you run the company with only 20% of the staff?
It turns out you don't need that many people to run Twitter.
But 80%? That's a lot.
Yes. If you're not trying to run some sort of glorified activist organization and you're not care that much about censorship, then you can really let go of a lot of people, it turns out.
How many others, without naming names, but how many, I had dinner with somebody who runs a big company recently who said, I'm really inspired by Elon. And I said, the free speech stuff? He goes, no, the firing the staff stuff. How many other CEOs have come to you to talk about this?
I spend a lot of time at work, so it's not like I'm meeting with lots of people. They see what, but I think we just had a situation at Twitter where it was absurdly overstaffed. So it wasn't. You look at say like, what does it really take to operate Twitter? Most of what we're talking about here is a group text service at scale. How many people are really needed for that? And if you look at what has been the product development over time with Twitter, and you years versus product improvements, and it's like a pretty flat line. So what are they doing? It took a year to add an edit button that doesn't work most of the time. I mean, I feel like it was a comedy situation here. You're not making cars, that's very difficult to make cars, or get rockets to orbit. So, the real question is how did it get so absurdly overstaffed? This is insane. Anyway, and it's clearly working. In fact, I think it's working better than ever. We've increased the responsiveness of the system by, in some cases, over 80%. We're trying to make Twitter the most trusted place on the internet, the least untrustworthy place on the internet. I don't think anyone should trust the internet, but maybe we can make Twitter the least untrustworthy. Like I said, try to get the truth to the people as best we can.